and welcome back. Today we're going to walk through a client case study. I'm going to walk you through what steps we took to get an individual down £30 from the comfort of their own home. Okay, now a lot of people are hopefully going to find this helpful and useful because we're currently in lockdown, so a lot of people are going to be able to relate to the situation. Now there's no drastic measures took through this process. In fact, you might be surprised at how simple it is. There's no gimmicks, no secret hacks, no special things we need to be eating or doing. It's all simple, straightforward strategies, steps that we took to get the result that we wanted. Now the first thing you need to do before you jump into your goal is to assess your current situation. Okay, one big issue and mistake a lot of people make is that they just grab a plan and say this will work, okay, or this will do, without assessing their current situation. If you don't assess your current situation, you're not setting yourself up for success. You're not seeing what is going to be realistic, what you can achieve and what you can do in terms of your plan given your current situation. Okay, if you just go out there and pick a plan or pick something to do without assessing your current situation, it might not fall in line. And if it doesn't fall in line with where you're at right now, it's not going to work. So the first thing we need to do is assess your current situation. There's going to be a few things we're going to look at. So the four main things we're going to look at and I want you to assess in your current situation right now is 1, your nutrition. We're going to break this down a little bit. 2, training/activity. 3, sleep. And 4, stress. Okay? So I'll give you an example of the things that we're going to be looking for and what that might then give us information for going forward with our plan. Okay? So using this example with the client that we had, when we looked at a nutrition, initially, there was no tracking of food intake, so we didn't know how much food intake we were taking in. There was poor control over macronutrient intake, which meant we potentially needed to play around with that. Okay, so from a nutritional aspect, there wasn't a lot of control around it. Training and activity. This client had just recently had a second child. Okay, so very very busy day to day, which meant activity-wise, probably wasn't going to be too low because running around the house looking after 2 children isn't the easiest of tasks. But training wise, time was going to be limited, so therefore in this current situation, training was very limited itself. Sleep, having 2 children of a young age, sleep's going to be interrupted. We know this. What does that mean? That means recovery isn't going to be as good. What does that mean? That means we probably have to be careful of training, activity and expenditure. Okay? We don't want to ramp those things up if recovery is not good enough and we're just going to feel rubbish. And then stress, very similarly linked to sleep. Again, stress, we know day to day in this situation, looking after 2 kids, stress is going to be pretty high. Okay, which again might have an impact on food choices, might have an impact on sleep quality, might have an impact on, again, training, performance. So we've got to take these things into consideration. Okay, but if we gather this information, this is then going to help us set up a plan, which I'm going to go through right now and how we did it with a client. Okay, so we've got this current situation, this map of what things are looking like at the minute before we introduce a plan and set targets and all that stuff. Now this is obviously just in like note form. This is sort of rough. This is sort of a quick sort of demonstration of how I might look at it. Okay. So from a nutritional point of view, like we just went through, we know that there's currently a lack of nutritional control. Okay, there's not really much tracked intake, macronutrients. We don't really know what's going on. Limit time for training. Possible poor quality sleep, and a very high stress day to day. Okay. Now, in this case study, the goal is obviously fat loss. Okay. So, one of the things we need to identify straight off the bat for fat loss is a calorie deficit. Okay. So a calorie deficit is taking in less calories than you're consuming. It's that energy balance, okay? But that's what we need to identify first, is how to create this energy balance, this deficit, okay, given our current situation. So given the current situation of this client, we understand that trying to increase expenditure to create this deficit might not be the most viable option, right? We know we're limited for time, for training, so therefore, realistically, we might not be able to push expenditure up. Right, again, this comes back to putting a plan in line with your current situation. If before this you had gone, do you know what, I'm just going to train a lot, okay, I'm going to go train 5 times a week, and then you come to bring that in and you come to realise training 5 times a week just isn't going to happen, then your plan is ruined, okay? So we understand that we're limited on time for training, okay? So training's probably going to have to be when and where we can fit it in. So let's start low, let's start the bar low. Let's say we're going to aim for 2 sessions a week, which is what we did originally, okay? However, we know that activity-wise, so say like step-wise, it's going to be relatively high because we're looking after 2 children. So we set a step target that was a little bit higher. We also knew that getting outside the house, going for a walk, we'll be able to include the kids as well, which allows us to bump steps up. So from an expenditure point of view, our goal was the majority of that to come through steps. So we could use steps, a little bit of training to try and bump that expenditure up. However, the biggest factor and control we had over this deficit was through intake. So currently there was a lack of nutritional control, but that's something that we had control of, that's something we could change. Okay, so one of the biggest things that we focused on here was tracking calories, creating a calorie target that once measuring that and seeing what happened, we knew we were in a deficit, and just consistently hitting that calorie target. Again, alongside macronutrient targets, mainly protein intake. Okay, so I'll move over to the side so you can see these little notes, hopefully you can read that. But this was simply, again, this is rough, not exact details, but this was simply the plan. Straightforward plan, okay? Simple steps, but effective. We wanted control of nutrition, so we set a calorie target. We hit that calorie target consistently alongside protein intake, okay? The 2 biggest basics for nutrition. We also then obviously made sure food is nutritious. We were including foods that help manage hunger, all that good stuff. Training wise, we tried to aim for 2 sessions a week. That sometimes dropped to 1, but we were trying to hit 2 to 1 sessions a week. The main focus was on a high step target. That was going to help us with our expenditure. Sleep, we just focused on trying to create a good sleep routine, okay? So we knew sleep had the potential to be interrupted, poor quality, because of the situation we were in. So we just did what we could in our control and try and make sure that sleep routine or that pre-bed routine was as good as possible. Similarly with stress, we know we were in a high stress situation, so we just focused on making sure we were taking time to de-stress. Okay, so that's number 1, assessing your current situation, and then number 2, I forgot to write number 2, but I explained it, of putting that plan into place, okay? So assess the situation, gather that data, then put in an appropriate plan, okay? The targets, the objectives, you're good, okay? Once you've done that, right, it's all about then being consistent, okay? So being consistent with that plan, those targets, those tasks that you've set, okay? And then making adjustments as time goes on, right? So you've got to be consistent. You've then got to gather the data back and get that feedback and see how those tasks are doing, right? So say for example, you might be taking pictures, you might be tracking your weight, your measurements, whatever you're doing, whatever you want to do, to give you an idea on how those tasks are doing, okay? So for example, again, with this particular case, we actually didn't need to make a lot of adjustments. The plan was set, the plan was good. We were being very, very consistent and we were getting the results that we wanted. If you're not consistent with the tasks week in, week out, you don't know how effective those tasks are. You have to be consistent. Don't rush to make adjustments until you are being very, very consistent, okay? As time goes on, you will likely need to make adjustments through a fat loss phase, 100%, because typically things tend to slow down at some point. This happened with us, but like I said, we didn't need to make a lot. When those adjustments need to be made, you can simply, perhaps reduce intake, perhaps increase expenditure to try and make sure that calorie deficit is staying at the relative same size that you're after. Again, which direction you decide to take with that will come with your situation. So for our situation, this case study, again, time was limited. We were already living a pretty stressful day-to-day life. Trying to up expenditure wasn't really an option we had. We did use stuff like adding more weight on walks to try and make sure the calories we were burning were the same when we were weighing an extra 10 kilograms, or as an example. So we did use methods like that, but we didn't really have the time or the resources to actually add extra sessions of expenditure. So we decided to create that deficit mainly through reduced intake. Okay, that was the option we took because for our situation, that was the best option. Okay, and then last step, after you've got the results that you want. Okay, this is a big step, and a lot of people forget it, and we really have to remember not to forget this step. Okay, what a lot of people do is that when they get their end result, when they get there, they almost just fall back into previous habits, or they don't think about how to transition out of where they're currently at. Okay, because where you're currently at is in a position where you're trying to get a specific result, you're trying to get a fat loss result. But once you've got those results, you need to transition out of that into a situation where you can maintain those results. Okay, now there's a difference between where you're at and where you need to be. What you need to do is you need to transition out of it by, again, finding this energy balance. This time you're looking for an energy balance where you're maintaining your current situation. So your intake wants to match your expenditure. Okay. So again, in this example, we mainly created a bigger deficit through reduced intake. Little bit of adjustments to increase expenditure, but mainly through reduced intake. So when we were transitioning out of this into a call it a maintenance phase, we simply slowly took calories back up and slowly brought expenditure down a touch until we found that balance, again gaining feedback from the measurements we were taking, until we found where we were sitting at maintenance. Okay, where we're maintaining our current condition, weight, again whatever measurements you're taking. Okay, but transitioning out of that and finding that position now lets the individual and yourself understand, you know, what you need to be doing day to day, how much food you roughly need to be eating, how many calories or what expenditure activity you need to be roughly doing day to day to maintain that current situation. Okay, and that's important going forward, because if you don't have that understanding, it's very easy to then lose the results that you've got. Hopefully this has helped you gain a better understanding of, you know, the process you might need to take towards getting the results you're after. Okay, and just remember, again, this is from home, this is with limited equipment. Okay, so the training sessions we did was literally just body weight. We used a few bands. You know, there wasn't a lot of equipment, but you don't necessarily need a lot of equipment. Okay, again, just remember, firstly, assess your current situation. Secondly, create a plan around your current situation, the plan that's going to fall in line with your current situation. 3, be consistent, first and foremost, and then make adjustments when needed, when and if needed. And then 4th, remember that you're going to need to transition out of where you have been. You're going to have to transition into a maintenance phase to sustain the results that you've got. Okay. Hopefully that makes sense. If you have any questions on this, need any more help, drop in the comments and let me know. If you found the video helpful, please drop a like as well. Please do subscribe and take care.